Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining today's Espresso demo. I hope you've, like us, I hope you've got your coffee ready. Today we're going to talk about why it's important to double down on your DNS and your email cybersecurity. Really pleased to be joined today by my friend and colleague, John Clausen. John, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be with you here, Billy. My name is John Clausen. I'm a sales engineer at Redshift, and I've been in the security industry for a couple of decades. I've worked with companies like McAfee and FireEye and startups. So really excited to be here and to share some of what we've learned with you.
Thanks so much, John. And I'm Billy McDermott. I'm the product lead for the ASM and certificate problems product, in Redshift. Sorry about that, frog in my throat. I also work really closely with John and head up our sales engineering team as well. So brilliant to have you all today. We've got a great audience. Do let us know if you've got any questions as they come in. But as always, you can ask questions after these sessions as well. So this is going to be a really informal chat. Like I said, we're going to talk about doubling down on your DNS and why that's actually important to you. DNS. This is one of my favorite sites. I know it's actually been kicking around for a very, very, very long time as well. It's isitdns.com. It's funny, and there's a reason why it actually stays funny. People always assume that when there's a problem on the internet that it's got something to do with DNS, and that continues to be the case. But why is it always DNS? Why is it always DNS that gets blamed? Why are there so many issues? We see it all the time, John, right? We talk to customers constantly. We're going to talk about some examples, but it's always like, oh, it's DNS's fault. It's the fault of DNS. Well, it's always a problem because it's a foundational technology. As I said, every service actually relies on it somehow. It's really complicated. It's got so many different parts to it. Although it appears fairly simple at the surface, the simplicity of DNS is actually quite deceiving. And to understand DNS, you might actually need to read hundreds of pages of RFCs, hundreds and hundreds, and nobody really wants to read so many RFCs. You might need to read thousands of pages of documentation. You might need to read books like this book, highly recommended, Managing Mission Critical Domains and DNS by Mark Yetovich as well, available on Amazon, highly recommended book. I don't know Mark, but it's highly recommended. If you've got this already, or if you've got a DNS book already, it's probably as dog-eared as my copy, right? Because it's a constant reference guide. You're constantly looking up things because it is so complicated. But when something goes wrong as well, the failures cascade. So when one problem happens, more problems will actually happen. It's often quite deceptive. So what you think the problem might be might not end up being the actual problem. Issues can lie upstream with your suppliers, so with your CDNs or with your DNS providers as well. So when it goes wrong, it really does go wrong. And then when you add that extra layer of complexity of having secure DNS, it makes it even more difficult. Because, John, you and I both know security is actually really difficult to do, isn't it? You know, people try their best, but it's still a challenge, and it's still really difficult to do. So to illustrate this and to illustrate like how difficult it is, we're going to tell you a story. And I say story, it's actually a true crime drama. It's based on something that's happened quite recently with a prospective customer. Okay. John, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think this will make a good Netflix documentary one day?
Yeah, Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know if our wives would want to watch it. I don't know if it's interesting, but hey, it's probably interesting for the people that have managed to join us today. So, look, there's tons talking. For the reasons that I've spoken about there already. It's really easy for a criminal to find weaknesses in DNS. There are clever people out there, people with big ambitions, looking for any way into a customer's infrastructure. Okay, and it's a continuous threat. It's a threat that happens regularly, and as I mentioned, we've got a recent example from a prospective customer. It's a large, well-known business. It's a consumer brand that has revenue in the billions and has got tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of customers globally. John and I were working with them during the evaluation process. And actually, we were looking, we were talking to them about different parts of the Redshift platform. And we noticed during the evaluation, we were looking at the on-DMARC product, and we noticed there was a number of emails that were sending from sources that had a bad reputation. We were looking at almost in as close to real time as possible. We were looking at a snowshoe attack where someone was trying to spread the load across multiple IP addresses. But quite uniquely, a high percentage of the email that was being sent was actually passing SPF. And you can see this report that comes from on-DMARC. It comes from our product. You can see that there's senders that have got a bad reputation. Normally, we'd see a low SPF pass rate when that happens. But in this case, the SPF rate was really high, John, wasn't it? It was very unusual. It was something that not very unusual, but it's something that we don't see that often. Now, the main SPF record for this customer didn't actually have any of the sending sources, so we started to investigate further, and we found that the email was actually coming from 2 hosts with 4th level domains. So it was, a subdomain of a subdomain, as such, to use slightly different language. And one of those hosts that was sending the email was the culprit of the overly permissive SPF records. Actually, those senders with the bad reputation had all been added to the SPF records. So we've reached a situation where we've now got SPF records in the DNS. So we're triaging further, and we then found that a CNAME had actually been added into the DNS. We found that CNAME it was created using created using a domain that was bought a number of months ago. It was a throwaway domain bought from a registrar that typically we see used for nefarious purposes. And the domain itself, the CNAME, the domain used in the CNAME, had been deliberately registered to look like the brand. Okay. It was deliberately registered to look like the prospective customer's brand name. And this was an attempt to obfuscate what was going on. So I'm just going to take a step back a second. What we're seeing here, we've noticed that there's email being sent. We've found that there's overly permissive SPF records. We've then found that they've been added because someone has been able to get a CNAME into the customer's DNS records, and they've tried to cover their tracks by using what we would call a friendly domain name. Okay, so that's where we've got to with this. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how is that actually possible? What has happened? And there's a few different things. John, would you like to just explain a little bit more here about how this could possibly have happened?
Yes. So once we identified the subdomains, we started trying to figure out, well, how could they be used? How could they be taken advantage of? And one of the possibilities is that there's a wildcard record. So wildcards can be very powerful, but with DNS, it also can point to existing and non-existing domains. So you've got basically you've got a wildcard set up, and you want to have a subdomain being used. You don't actually have to have that enabled. So it's just the wildcard piece there. So it's for this customer, it was a big surprise first that those subdomains were being used, and then the second one, as we dug into it, seeing a wildcard could open things up for the attacker. And by the way, they tend to look at, as you said, Billy, all the possibilities that are out there. They're very meticulous about going through and looking for every weakness that's on there.
And one of the things with wildcards as well is, in fact, you and I were talking about this earlier, John. There's most organizations are using wildcard DNS for various reasons and genuine use cases, and we see it quite a lot with our ASM customers, because we do see a sudden influx of hosts sometimes and accounts where wildcard DNS is actually being used, and it's being used for genuine reasons. It's all where it has to resolve to, or where it saves time, because you want every host to resolve to the same place. But I think it's important, if you are using wildcard DNS, any kind of wildcard setup, that it's important to understand not only the use case and the benefits of using it, but what the potential risks are. So, just be aware that when using wildcard DNS, that if someone does get access to your DNS, then it makes it much easier for them to actually then create additional records that could be used for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And here's another example where there's great benefit from having CNAMEs, being able to point to services, hosts, different resources that are out here. But in this particular case, if you're not able to keep track of them, you can run into an orphan situation or a dangling situation. Basically, the CNAME points to something that's no longer providing a service, may no longer exist on here. So at the top example, that's normal operation. The middle line is showing that that service, maybe it was a payment gateway, and you changed providers on that. Maybe it was a help desk service and you changed on that. Anyway, it's very, very easy these days to get a new service and put into place, but you may not know or recall where it's all being referenced to. So in that second line, we can see that nothing's changed in DNS, but the response isn't there anymore. The website that it was pointing to is deprovisioned. And then the last piece is where the attackers come in. Again, they're able to meticulously go through your entire environment and see what's not being used or not responding, and replace that. Take over that subdomain, and now they've got it pointing to their service on there. So yeah, and I think, Billy, you see a lot of this in your the potential for this, and when you're doing the attack surface and stuff on there.
Yeah, I mean, the rise in cloud computing means that this is common. The unpatchable attack surface is increasing all the time, whether that's when cloud's used for DNS, or whether you're actually using the cloud resources themselves. And it's very easy because of distributed teams who are empowered and who are able to actually go and create their own resources, for example, in cloud accounts. It's easy for them to spin up services and to update the DNS to point to them. But people are human. And then, like you say, when they're deprovisioning things, John, they just forget about it, don't they? They just forget, I need to update the DNS, or there's no programmatic structure in place to automatically update the DNS. And that's where that dangling issue really occurs. And certainly more providers are susceptible to take over than others. But what we think has happened in this case, this probably hasn't been a cloud provider, it's been another provider, And the difference that we see with a cloud provider, if there is a subdomain takeover, generally speaking, the resource that it was pointing to, the name won't have changed there. So it's pretty easy to go, all right, that was a load balancer that was in AWS, or that was storage that was in Azure, or whatever it was. In this case, what we think has happened is actually it's the attackers potentially, if they did use this method, they potentially attacked using a service where they've been able to change the service name to a friendly name. So that CNAME that I was talking about earlier, to make it look like the organization has actually been, make it look like it's been the organization themselves that's changed the service name and not the attacker. So if this was the route, if this is what actually happened, it's a little bit of an edge case. It's not something we see all the time, but they've actually been able to go into the third-party service and then change the service to that friendly CMAIN to obfuscate what's actually going on.
Yeah. So the next one you could see that this attacker potentially could use this method is a DNS zone transfer. And these zone transfers, they're very useful if you're trying to start up a secondary server. You need to copy everything from the primary to the secondary. The challenge is that it gives all this information, and if a hacker is able to run that zone transfer, they're going to get visibility to your DNS records and much more than what's publicly available that's on there. Now, to protect yourself, there are two ways. One is to just disable it. So don't have the zone transfer option on. Turn it on for just the time you need to do the zone transfer, turn it back off. The second one is to have a list of trusted IPs that can perform the transfer. So there are a number of things that we've mentioned, a couple others. One is that the credentials obviously could have been compromised to get into DNS. There are attackers that have figured out how to put a DNS spoof on your machine, meaning that they can have something running that will change your DNS server, point you to a different place. So, all of these we would be able to go through and rule out. The key thing is that having this visibility to seeing everything that's there really lets you, as we say, double down and understand what's out there and investigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, both the inside out method, the credential leaks that we're talking about, protecting yourself, there's important. But just to re-emphasize that point on doubling down, as your attack surface is increasing, and every single customer that we work with, every single prospect that we're working with sees an increase in these type of assets, whether it's hosts, whether it's IP addresses, whether it's certificates, whatever it is, the attack surface is increasing all the time. So whether it's DNS or whether it's any other part of your configuration, it's so important to have visibility of every single asset that you have in a single place, in a single pane of glass, so that you can keep an eye on actually what's going on. You know about any changes that are happening to any part of the configuration, and so you can mitigate the risks that actually come from having so many different assets on the internet, and importantly, so many different asset types on the internet. The other point here as well is that when someone has control of your DNS or has control of something that your DNS is pointing to, what else can they do with that capability, John? Right? I mean, if they've got access there, what else are they doing? Particularly when this is a sophisticated attack. Like we said, there was a lot of planning went on to this, right? This was premeditated. This was deliberate, and was a few months at least in the planning. So did they do anything else? If they've got DNS, then they could have obtained some valid certs. It would have been easy for them to have grabbed wildcard certificates if they had control of the DNS. They could have modified the MX records so that the inbound email was being intercepted. And that, I mean, John, what happens when your MX records get changed? What happens when your inbound email is intercepted?
Yeah, so there's business email compromise attacks and more that go on. The key here is that everybody depends on DNS. Everything starts with DNS, and you know, these guys looked like they were taking their time, but also the snowshoe attack was to spread it out, so potentially it could be happening from a number of different places as well. So again, to stay underneath the radar there and so on. So
they could have had multiple agendas, right? They could have been talking, as well as, sending out emails that were fraudulent to try and redirect people in a some kind of fraudulent activity. That could have been a distraction. Actually, the main issue, they could have been changing MX records to actually then grab inbound email to try and do a password grab, to try and actually find. And it only needs to be done temporarily. It can be a matter of minutes, okay, that change is made for, and that allows an attacker to have access to your inbound email. Basically, the summary there of that point is, if your zone's compromised, you're done. To quote my colleague Mike that works in our team, that's what he said. So let's talk about prevention, John. What do you? We've spoken about some points there about some ways of protecting yourself. What else should people be actually doing to prevent themselves from DNS attacks and mitigate the risk if a DNS attack actually does happen? Yeah,
so the biggest protection I see that's a very clear win is the DMARC, to stop that exact domain spoofing. And I like to say it's DMARC others as you would DMARC yourself, meaning, it's important that you have your record set up, even though your own organization may not be the primary user of them. It would be your supply chain, your customers and things, but you don't want your customers to find out that the emails they've received from your CEO are not from your CEO, right? So that's the one that I would look at. And the second one is that it's really important to complement that by making sure that any DNS changes are detected, so you're not flying under the radar. You may think you have full control over your DNS, but it's not there. Or you may think everything's configured correctly, but when an analysis is done, it's not, and it's complicated, as Billy said. It's not because you don't have smart, hardworking people on it. It's complicated. Yeah, and maybe you can show them, Billy, what it looks like. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is our ASM and certificate tool. We called Hardenise. What you can see here is an inventory of all the assets, and as I said, all the asset types have got different configurations, but in particular for the focus here for DNS, you're interested in the domains and you're interested in the host. So we build that public facing inventory and give you a view of it all in one place, so everything. And we can connect to your infrastructure. We support zone transfers. We can connect to your cloud environment to give you complete visibility of what's actually going on. We assess the security at a DNS level and at a domain level, okay? And one of the big preventions that we can do, as John said, is we're going to show you your DNS zone, and we're going to show you your DNS records, okay? So here's a example here of a DNS zone configured for this domain. You can see the full name servers, you see all the statuses of the name servers, and you see all the addresses. But we also do a full inspection of the DNS records themselves. and we do a check for any dangling or orphaned DNS records. We tell you about them as they happen. You can use our issues feature to receive notifications about dangling DNS issues as they happen, so that you can triage and remediate them and stop that type of attack actually happening. These assessments are updated daily, or they can also be updated on demand. So with Harden Eyes, with our ASM tool, you get complete visibility of your estate and the domain health and the DNS health that's in your estate. Additionally, if any new subdomains are created and they match one of your domain names, we'll automatically add it to your inventory. We will tell you that a new domain has actually been found. We use multiple different sources to do that, as well as connecting to your own infrastructure. So you'll have visibility in one place. And additionally, John mentioned that issue with zone transfers. If zone transfers are accidentally made public, as part of our configuration checks, if public zone transfers are possible in your estate, we will tell you about it as well. So really, visibility of all your assets, the domain configuration and the DNS configuration. That's one of the big steps that you can take, John, to seriously protecting the DNS configuration in your estate and mitigating the risks that these attacks from criminals actually cause. John, do you want to talk a little bit as well just about how our other solutions can then mitigate, if there's anything else you want to add there in terms of other solutions that might be able to mitigate the risks?
Yeah, so these are, you can see from the screen here that the email, for example, all our solutions are built on one platform. So you see that we're checking for DMARC and SPF, the details there. I'm just going to go ahead and show my screen here. And the piece I wanted to highlight is that this is our DMARC product, on DMARC. DMARC's a journey. So to get to DMARC enforcement and the protection so nobody can spoof your domain, you need to get visibility. So we're taking all those DMARC records that are raw XML, not human readable. And then from those, we're also getting all the sources. So this may look familiar from where that detection was done, that report showing that, things we're using that have a bad reputation we're sending out using SPF and so on here. So the key thing here is that these are automatically and continuously checked, so you have the visibility in things. And then once you go ahead and want to classify those, put those into your records, we go ahead and do that for you to make sure you have the correct values, and that we can check and see, for example, what's going on there on that. So
and that's the DMARC record, the DMARC reporting, having it all in that one place. You've hit the nail on the head, actually. Having the ASM tools, the certificate tools, the DMARC reports, and our other products in that single pane of glass is really important. It means you can, identify the services that are, sending out email, for example, using our ASM product. There might be hosts that you don't know or use for email. So you should be making sure that those are protected by DMARC. You should be moving those over into our own DMARC product and getting reporting from those, so that if an issue does happen, then you will know about it as soon as possible. So it's both, right, John, that proactive measure, making sure that you're having visibility of all the assets and the configuration of all those assets, whilst at the same time getting as much actionable insight as you can, or knowing where to get that actionable insight if an incident does happen.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we're talking about doubling down, right? Because if you don't have DMARC enforcement in place, you've got an opening there that someone could take advantage of. And likewise, if you've got DMARC, but you don't have the visibility and all the DNS configurations, the analysis that's provided there, you're exposed on there. So,
what a great point to end on.
Yep.
So Thank you all so much for joining, John. As always, it was a pleasure to sit down and chat with you about this. If you'd like a free online assessment of your infrastructure, then do go to redshift.com and sign up. And one of our security consultants will be in touch. We'd be delighted to talk about you. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day, no matter what time zone you're in. John, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And it's 4:30 for me. A little bit more time left to the rest of the day, and then it will be time.
Always great to chat with you, Billy. Thanks.
Thanks for now, John.